This episode of the Added Time podcast is sponsored by Phone Express. Back to the Added Time podcast with me, Alan Myers, and my co-presenter, Tony Grant. We've got a great interview for you this week with the former Champions League winner and Blackburn striker, Benny McCarthy. We'll hear all kinds of things from Benny. He talks about a wide range of issues, and Tony and I will then discuss what he talks about. But well, first of all, Tony, and welcome to the programme. We'll talk about this weekend's just gone football. Again, Manchester United making the headlines in the Premier League. Liverpool's unbeaten run gone. Let's start with Manchester United, and it just seems, they seem to have one step forward and then two steps back, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they brought Amarin over from Portugal, and I was looking at it, and he's had a lot of pressure on him from day one. Really, results just haven't gone for him. He's come into the new season. He's stuck to his guns on his formation. He's always had that bit of pressure from outside on him. So then I started looking at his background, and he's a young manager come over. For me, he never had enough credit in the bank to become the Man United manager. I think some clubs, smaller clubs, you don't need that much credit. I remember Mourinho came over to the English League, to Chelsea, but he just won the European Cup. So we sort of had that credit, not just Portuguese managers, I mean foreign managers in general. The big clubs, you've heard many players have struggled at big clubs back in the day. The club's just too big for them. So I'm not sure he had the credit in the bank to withhold lots of poor results. And that's what they've had. Because even the same guy, if he'd have come over and started winning, we wouldn't be talking about this now. But the results have been so bad, it's easy to punch holes into everything he does now. He's been a little bit stubborn in his way, but if he'd have won games, it'd be all right. Because he keeps losing, everyone's after him. Now, if he had a bit of credit in the bank, he'd probably get a bit longer.
You look at Manchester United and people say it's the players. And they've said that for quite some time because there's been a number of managers. And Benny McCarthy will actually touch on that in a moment. But there's the ownership issues with the Glazers and then Jim Ratcliffe coming in. Are there almost too many problems at Manchester United to deal with at once? And in the end, it doesn't matter what anyone says. You've been at football clubs where there's been problems. Is it a point where that does affect, no matter what else is going on around, that does affect what's happening on the team?
I think it does, Al. I think for big clubs, I go back to having credit in the bank. If you haven't got it, you have to have a big personality, a real big personality.
But he came from Sporting though with a good. I mean, is that not? It's not the level that you. I mean, when you're moving up to Manchester, is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is he's a young manager, and I'm sure he's a good manager. He's going through a bad time. It's not. I'm not being disrespectful, but other clubs are smaller than Man U. Man U's a monster of a club. Sporting Lisbon are a big club in a way in Portugal, but they're not Benfica and they're not Porto. They're just behind that, and he's done a great job. He brought Gyökeres over, but Gyökeres was playing for Coventry City.
Yeah,
it's a different, and he's done great with them. So he's obviously got ability as a manager, but then you throw him into the Lions Den, at a humongous club. I'm not sure his age, if he hasn't got the personality to go with it, because now he's going into a dressing room full of World Cup players, full of pressure. Every game's pressure. 65,000 who've been watching football for the last couple of years with not much fun. Now this guy comes in and he wants to stamp his authority on it, which was easier to do in the Portuguese league with Sporting Lisbon. It's much easier. And he's got a formation. And now the press are after him, ex-players are after him because he won't move. So all spotlights on him. And when I go back to saying credit in the bank, if he was a bigger name or a bigger personality, he'd have less pressure at him. It would come, but not so soon.
And probably be able to deal with it better.
And possibly deal with it better, yeah. So Now there's a big issue around lots of press saying, lots of ex-players saying he won't budge on his formation. Now, when he got the job, he was a young man. He's a young man, but he probably didn't realise how big this club was going to be. I don't think until you've played for a big club do you realise how big some clubs are. Do I think he'll see it out? No, I don't think it'll happen. I think the personalities in that dressing room, I think they'll read the press, they'll read social medias now. They've sort of lost not so much respect, but in his ideas, they're probably not believing in his ideas no more. So it doesn't look like it's going to really end well. And where they go from there, for me, that's going to be the next debate, isn't it?
Well, as I say, we'll hear from Eddie McCarthy in a moment with regards to what he thinks they should do with Amarin. But another manager that's been in the news over the last few days is Nuno Espirito Santo. Of course, unceremoniously disregarded by Nottingham Forest, which was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, I think, and finds himself back at West Ham United within weeks of finishing at Forest. He's back in the Premier League. Good move for West Ham, I think.
It's just going back on what I was saying about Amarin, about having credit in the bank. Nuno's got credit in the Premier League, and he hasn't gone to a Man U. He's gone to a West Ham, who at the moment are sitting in the bottom three, and they're a much smaller club than Man U. So he's got loads of credit in the bank. So when he walks into that dressing room, I'm sure them players are going to stand to attention in a way and do what he says. You know, they might run through a brick wall for Nuno, because he has got that credit. He's done it. He built a great team at Forest, had a great season last year. He got Wolves promoted from the Championship and created a good team at Wolves. And now he's going to move on to West Ham. I think he's probably a good signing for West Ham. I think it's probably what they needed. Where it'll take them, I don't know. But I think right now, I think it was probably a good decision.
Are you surprised that they got rid of Potter, or maybe not surprised that they got rid of him, but are you surprised it didn't go as well as it probably might have done for him?
I think West Ham's a tough one to get right. I really do. I don't think they have the pick of the best players in Europe. I don't think they get that. I think they got to be careful in how they want to play. I think the connection with the fan base, I don't mean the fans are disloyal to the club at all. I mean, the atmosphere it creates at that stadium is a bit different. I think it needs almost. I think Moyes and Nunes are like similar types of manager. I think Nuno. When I look at Nuno, I see some comparisons to Moyes. Yeah, more so than to a Potter. Um, I didn't think Potter was going to fail the way he's failed. But I think Nuno was probably a better fit for West Ham than what Potter is.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll see how he gets on.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Liverpool and Crystal Palace, because that was it was a great game. It was also, Crystal Palace are doing so well under Glasner, aren't they? And one of the unbeaten records was going to go, the weekend. It was Liverpool who got beaten the last minute. I mean, have they pushed their luck a little bit too much over the games? We've talked about the late finishes that they've had, the late winners.
Yeah, I think for me, Palace are such a success story in the last few years anyway. The players they brought in and sold on, who've gone. And then they're unbeaten this year. They're doing ever so well.
I think it's 15 games.
Is it 15 as well? And then Liverpool turn up. And we've spoke about Liverpool in the last couple of weeks where they haven't been great. They've been really good in spells of the game. And they've got some late goals. And the Premier League's such a tough league anyway, that, going to Palace, even when Palace have been mid-table, going to Palace is a tough game, but now they've lost Eze, haven't they? And you think they're a little bit weaker, but they're proving everyone wrong, Palace, this year. And was I surprised? I'm not saying I was surprised, because I do think Palace is a tough place to go, and the fans get behind Palace. And Liverpool probably don't deserve to be 6 out of 6. They probably haven't warranted that. So I think it's good for the league, because now it's brought a bit of people can see that, you know what, they're not that far ahead. Because if they'd have won, all of a sudden it just becomes further and further. But I think it was a fantastic result for Palace. And maybe Liverpool have got to look a bit inwards and see that, we are top of the league, but have we really deserved to be there? And if we carry on this way, is another defeat round the corner?
And of course, Arsenal win, dramatic late win for them as well, and also Manchester City look as if they're back to maybe not their best, but certainly coming back to their best.
Yeah.
So well, let's just go back to Amarin and to Nuno, because we've spoken with Benny McCarthy, the former Porto player, and of course he's been at Manchester United as a coach over the last couple of years under Ten Hag. He's left now, of course. He's manager now of the Kenyan national team, and McCarthy first of all talks about the fact that Manchester United can't keep changing managers.
He's young, and he's probably the best part of this new generation of managers coming out after what he's achieved at Sporting Lisbon. So I think if they give him the time, if they give him what he wants, he can bring in the players he wants to bring in. And then it will definitely, the players that he wants to bring in will suit the system that he wants to play. That he stick by his guns, that he wants to play a certain system. So the club has to help him in that sense as well, to give him the team, the players that he needs to then execute his system. But success doesn't just happen over time. Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time. And Amarin had a full season behind him, and now this season, hopefully that he can adapt to what the Premier League standards requires, and he can definitely bring some success to that club. Nuno's a great fit for any club. He's a humble human being. He's got an unbelievable personality, great character, a lot of respect for people, for everyone. And then he's just brilliant at his job. He knows how to get the best out of players. His man management skill is second to none. I know him personally from being a teammate, and obviously like interacting with him after our playing days. And I spoke also recently to one of his ex-players as well, Anthony Elanga, that I'm very friendly with, and Anthony only has kind and praises talk about Nuno, and yeah, we kind of share the same stories about Nuno. So I know for a fact that he's a manager. He would strive wherever he goes. He'll get the best of a lot of players because of the skill set that they have, managing players, and then obviously his tactical abilities and how to make teams play attractive football and winning football. So I think that would attract a lot of clubs.
Well, Tony, I mean, we've just heard there from McCarthy, Benny McCarthy, and he's talking about Amarin and that Manchester United have got to stop changing managers. And we've seen it, at our club, Everton, when there's so many managers, they bring their own players, and then you have a mismatch of a squad. And also he's talked about Nuno Espirito Santo and how good a character he is, which is what we were talking about before. Do you disagree with him with regards to Amarin?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can appoint the wrong one. It doesn't mean Amarin's a bad manager, and I'm sure he will go on and be a good manager in other places. But also spending more and more time on the ideology that he's the right one, you're just wasting time. Unless you're prepared as a club to sit down and maybe get rid of a number of players that he actually doesn't want. And he's playing with wing backs, and he's come out and told everyone he's not going to change. Now, do Man U want to be a club who have wing backs? I don't know. I mean, there's some clubs who change managers and it doesn't affect the team. You've seen that with Brighton in the last couple of years, and you've seen that with Brentford at the moment. They're doing okay. Now all of a sudden, this manager's coming and wants to play three at the back. Now, we got brought up with Man U having wingers, so do Man U as a club want to go down that road where the manager changes the formation, or have they actually got their way of playing themselves? Because if this manager fails and the next guy comes in and wants to play 4 at the back, well, you just spent all this money. So I'd like to know, what do Man U actually want to do? You know what I mean? Do I think
That's down to Wilcox and people like Berardi, isn't it? As to which way they want to play.
well, it should be. It
But
should
surely they bring in a manager to fit that.
You'd have thought so. Man U really shouldn't need, you go back, they shouldn't need that much. We don't need to mess around with it too much. They went from being the best team for a full generation, the greatest team in this land for a full generation. Now all of a sudden, different managers are messing around with it. It's like they've just lost what Sir Alex has built for all them years, and then there's a Dutch guy coming in messing around with it, and there's another guy coming in messing around with it, another guy coming. And I've sort of lost what Man U were, to a point where they've got some great players, but I never see it. I never watched them and come away thinking that was fantastic. That's a fantastic team. I don't see it.
Okay, and listening to Benny McCarthy, someone who knows Nuno, and I didn't know this, but Nuno was actually on the bench as a goalkeeper in that game for Porto
Yeah,
when they won the Champions League under Mourinho.
amazing.
And that takes us nicely on to the next clip we've got from Benny McCarthy, and that is regarding Jose Mourinho. Of course, that was where Jose Mourinho made his name before coming to Chelsea, and he's been talking about how great a manager Jose really is.
Fondly. Great memories, and when you think back, when you watch football now, and you think back when we played, how different it was, how difficult it was as well. But yeah, I think just because we had so much success, it's you smile when you talk about those moments. You smile when you talk about, or when you see your ex teammates now. That's all going into management, into coaching, and where they are, and then you kind of just rerun those moments back in your head when we used to play, what we were like as players, and how we gave managers such a lot of time, and now you on that other end, you the manager now. So I wonder how they deal with it when they know, like, they used to give managers really hell when we played, and now we all managers or coaches, and if we accept players taunting us the way we used to taunt managers back in the days. But yeah, that's great, and it's also nice to see that Jose has gone back to the Portuguese league, not with our team, but at least he's managing Benfica, and I hope he can bring some success back to Portugal, whether it's with Benfica and not with my beloved Porto. But yeah, Portugal, they need a team to be up there again, and the fact that he's at Benfica, I'm always rooting for him, not for Benfica, but for Mourinho. So I want him to have success wherever he is.
How different is he as a manager now to what he was at Porto? When you got that, because that was what really sort of brought him to the table, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he was a player's manager. He was unbelievable, man. I think he could get you to do anything, and as a player, I could run through a glass window for him, knowing that I might get slashed along the way, but I would do it if he asked me to, because that's just the type of manager he was. He had with his players, and he was ultrasound. Um, and I saw an interview or something that recently, him saying that he's becoming the old Jose again. This guy that people know now is going to be forgotten, and he's going back to his old ways. And I thought, good on him, because he was by far, for me, one of the best managers that any player could play for. Yeah.
Jose Mourinho. I mean, when you listen to Benny McCarthy there, I mean, he is something special, isn't he? He came as the special one, didn't he? Is he in the elite
Yeah, I think
managers?
for me, looking from outside in. I know I've used a lot about credit, and he came over, and none of us really knew of Jose. I think most of us first seen him running down the line at Old Trafford.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And I think a lot of us liked what we've seen, because you've seen that sort of like authenticity and passion just come out. You know, who wouldn't do that in the last kick of the game at Old Trafford? So we sort of got a glimpse of him. For me, I think he's been one of the greatest managers I've seen. I always remember back in the day, there was a player playing for Middlesbrough. I think his name was Jeremy,
Okay.
and he went to Chelsea.
Remember him?
Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And I was a young player at the time. And in football, you know, if you're not playing, there's lots of players who actually don't want the team to do too well. You know, that's the reality of lots back in that
Human
day.
nature.
Yeah, in human nature. And Jeremy went for a big signing. And I remember they were live on TV, and they scored a goal. And Jeremy went straight. It was had just come on sub, but he hadn't been getting the game. Jeremy scored, and the first player person he ran to celebrate with was the manager. And I thought, it showed a lot. That showed a lot to me in that instance.
Well, Benny just described him as a great players manager.
Yeah.
Who do you put down as a great players manager that you've played for?
With some of the managers I've played for, I'd say probably two of the best players managers I've played for really would probably be Joe Royle at Everton, and probably Stan Turner at Burnley. You know, both different in their way.
What does that mean, a players manager? What does
I
that
think
mean?
that means a little bit to what Benny said, to be honest with you, where regardless of anything, they fill you with confidence.
Right.
They make you feel as though you're 6 foot tall, 7 foot tall, and you can do anything. They'll still get after you. You know, it's not all nicey nice, but when they get after you, you do know it's from the right place.
But it's about you
But
rather
it's
than
about
them.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of managers is about them, isn't it?
Correct,
I think,
yeah.
you know, I've seen them for
Yeah.
many years, and
Yeah.
you know. So, well, listen. We're going to move on now again, because Benny McCarthy is, of course, the national team manager of Kenya, and he's been talking about that role and what he's hoping to bring to it.
Every single day I learn something new about Kenya. I learned that they've got so many extended players all over the world, you know, that's got a Kenyan mother or a Kenyan father, like with immediate ties to the country, and they play at respectable clubs in Europe throughout. So my pool of players have just gotten worldwide, globally. So of course, if I'm smart, and I would really dig into that and see and take the best players I can take from wherever they are, whichever league that they play in, based on their forms and everything, integrate them with the national team, and then just build a proper team for, yes, I think for World Cup qualifications now. It's a little bit out of our reach because I think Ivory Coast and Gabon are just out of reach for everybody, and it's those two countries that's fighting it out, that's going to qualify automatically for the World Cup. So I can take the opportunity now to integrate new players into the squad and give them a taste of international football, World Cup qualifiers. But the main goal is 2027, the African Nations Cup championship. Kenya is the host of the tournament, so we've got brand new stadiums that's been built, that's been completed the end of the year. So we've got so many positive things happening. So so you want to start building for 2027 AFCON, and the success that we had over Chan with all the local players, you know. You want to build on from there. Now the country have become united, and the country have become, they're behind the national team. So you wanna ride that wave, having the fans there and building a really, really good Kenyan national team, so that come 2027, you don't just host the tournament and participate, but you actually setting a strong claim for getting to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, or even getting to a final. You know, so I have 2 years basically now to build a really proper, strong Kenyan national team.
We wish Benny, of course, all the best of luck with Kenya and going up to that 2027 African Nations Cup. And also Tyler Onyango, who we've talked about on this programme before. And, hopefully he might be playing for Kenya at that point as well. But let's talk about the FL now, Tony. And an interesting week if you're a Blackburn person. And we're going to have Benny talking about his time at Blackburn, because that's where... do you remember him playing at Blackburn?
I do. He played with a big Santa Cruz, didn't he?
I think it was Mark Hughes that broke it.
Yeah, Blackburn were always a good Premiership team, in all them years. And from the Northwest, it was a great ground to go to. I played there myself for Everton and for Man City over the years. Blackburn is a great club, but it was a well-established Premier League club when Benny was playing. Yeah,
I think stability was the word he used, and that was something that was always evident, wasn't it, whenever you went there. We'll talk about them in a minute. Benny McCarthy talks about his time at Ewood Park, but a strange week for them with the with the situation over the abandoned game, and as we sort of suspected in the last podcast, the game will be replayed. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's the only way. I think you've seen many a game where goals go in last kick of the game or into injury time. And I think in the modern game now, expecting 7-8 minutes of injury time is a norm, isn't it? Back in the day, 1 or 2 minutes maybe. So it's harsh if you're leading the game with 20 or 15 minutes left, whatever it was left. It is harsh. But the game wasn't over. And as a coach, you play to the 95th minute these days. So the game has to be replayed. Simple as that. So forget about it. It's not nice, but you can't dwell on the past. It's gone now. But it was always going to be an interesting week. This week, looking at them two clubs.
And of course, they got beat at the weekend, Blackburn, quite heavily actually by Charlton, which I didn't expect. But a good win for Chris Wilder. It's great to see him get off the mark with a victory away.
Yeah.
He gives everything to that club, doesn't he? So you do wish him well, don't you?
Well, it's like a little bit of the Nuno going to West Ham, or even Hammond staying in a way. Sheffield, a huge club in the Championship. They've tasted the Premier League. They could have stayed with the manager for longer and longer and longer, and then brought Chris Wilder in. But they've made a decision to get Chris Wilder, who at the moment is a better fit.
And really, a bit of humble pie as well, isn't it?
Of course. And, they hadn't won a game. How Sheffield not won a game?
Yeah.
They've got to win a game. They've been at home enough games. So I think they made the right decision, and they've got enough time. They're actually, don't be surprised if Sheffield are in the top 6 at the end of the season, because I think there's a lot of, I don't think it's a tough Championship this year. I think if they go on a run, I think they'll be hard to beat. But I think they made the right decision at the right time, which gives Chris enough time to get a run going.
Well, as we say, Blackburn were beaten at the weekend by Charlton, but Benny McCarthy remembers his time very fondly at Ewood Park, and he's been talking about that.
Oh, very much. Blackburn, yeah. A lot of love for Blackburn. They were my first club when I came to the Premier League, and it was a memorable time. Really great people working for the club, and they made me fall in love with England. And I will always be grateful for Blackburn for that. But yeah, my time there, we've always been in the top 10. So I never remember Blackburn being out of the top 10 while I played there so it was a team that was very consistent. They were stable in the league. They were well-run club, fantastic fan base. And just amazing people that worked in and around the club that made the club so special. The people that worked on the front line that made the club really what it is and special. And it's a shame that you see them where they are now in the Championship, struggling to find their path back into the Premier League. But there's always hope. Last season they finished just outside the playoff places when they changed the managers. John Eustace leaving for Derby, And then, the club kind of new manager came in and he couldn't maintain what the club had built up until then. So they missed out on the playoffs, to almost find themselves back in the Premier League. And so you kind of hope you want to see that club back in the Premier League one day again.
As you said there, I guess it must be difficult for you to see them, because they were such a stable club at that time, weren't they? And you're playing with the likes of Roque Santa Cruz up front, and you had Mark Hughes as the manager, and then Paul Ince, so a real stable club.
Yeah, they were stable. They got top players coming to play for the club. I remember we even got the likes of Mitchell Salgado to come from Real Madrid and join, coming to play for Blackburn. Where would that have happened if Blackburn weren't so stable, if they were consistently in the top half of the Premier League? So players looked at Blackburn on the whole to come and play there, and it was attractive. And now you don't see that anymore. Like when I look back and I watch Blackburn now, I don't even recognize anybody, any of the players or that. But I really hope that they can get it together and get themselves back into contentions in the Championship, so they can get back into the Premier League.
Right. Well, Tony, look, one of the things we talked to Benny about, and we'll get his version in a moment, was best and worst players you've played against. Let's hear from Benny first then about the best player he ever played with, and then also the most toughest opponent that he ever came across. Bit of a surprise, that one.
All of my career, I have to say, there's a few, but the one gentleman stands out, and where he's been and what he's achieved, and it has to be Michael Laudrup. I had the honor to play with Michael Laudrup at Ajax. When I was at Ajax, a young player coming through, and you see the professionalism, and a player, one of the first ever players to have made the switch from Real Madrid to Barcelona and then back to Real Madrid. Never ever has anything like that even happened. And he was one of those players that made the switch between the two giants of world football. But just the things that he could do with the ball, the vision, the skills, and the intelligence. Oh wow, I've never seen. When you were a 19-year-old kid and you play with somebody like that, like wow, if you don't learn anything in life, then football is not for you. It's not your sport. And I had the pleasure and honor to play with Michael Laudrup, and he was the greatest player I've played with.
And who was the toughest opponent? Who was the toughest centre half?
Nerdia Bakko. I think Jaap Stam has to go in that list. Nemanja Vidic, John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, Paolo Maldini had me in his pocket for 2 games in a row. Ricardo Carvalho, my old teammate from Porto. But I played against all those players and they were phenomenal, and they in the top 10. But the number 1 on that list, the player who scared me, was the only player that made me ask the manager to change, was a player I played against in the Europa League. He played for Celtic, Bobo Balde. Bobo Balde hit me with 1 tackle. He made me do a somersault. And after that tackle, I think I must have switched position. I went to play left wing, I went to play right wing, and I came back to striker. I just couldn't, and I asked the coach to be changed, and he had me running scared, and that was the only time I ever was frightened in a match, was when I faced Bobo Balde. And the worst thing was, it was 2 Africans. I thought he was my brother. I thought, Africans, we kind of look out for each other, but he went all in for me that day. He took me out, and that was Yeah, he had me running scared, and no other defender in my whole career made me feel like that.
But Tony, I mean, have you ever been scared on a football pitch?
I wouldn't say I've been scared. I have been hit once, and it stayed with me, which is why I'm probably going to tell you now. I remember playing for Everton versus Newcastle at Goodison Park, and do you remember Robert Lee?
I do.
Robert Lee,
Yeah, Newcastle.
yeah, and he hit me with a fair tackle. But going back in them days, Al, I was 10 stone playing centre mid, in a 4-4-2 formation, and I like to get stuck in, but I had no weight. Rob Lee was more compact and had definitely had a couple of stone on me. But he hit me with a tackle one day, and whether my injuries later on, nothing to blame because it was a good strong tackle, but whether my injuries down the line was like this is a wake up call. I'm still feeling the injury now. Still feeling the tackle now. But I never feared no one. Um, you know, you sort of had to look after yourself. I mean, I broke my ankle in a game at Goodison Park, and with when I say broke my ankle, I got hit in an injury with a tackle, which is a late tackle, but it was with a guy who ends up playing football, centre mid with, a guy called Kevin Ball
All
from
right. Yeah, I
Sunderland.
remember Kevin Ball.
And
Yeah.
Kevin, I played with Kevin at Burnley, and Kevin was a hard man. He was the old school hard man, but you know, I never feared him. There was no fear of going on the pitch against him. You just have to look after yourself. You have to be aware of something could happen. And if you weren't, you normally got hurt.
I mean, it's quite interesting to hear Benny McCarthy talking about telling the coach to change him. I mean, that's
Yeah.
quite dramatic, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
that is true.
and it's quite honest of him as well.
Yeah, I do remember Bowley playing again. I'm sure it was Rangers, and he does look a fearsome guy. If you got on the wrong side, I wouldn't like to get on the wrong side of him.
Who were they? The worst centre halves? Were they the ones who did all the or fullbacks? You know, I mean, I guess when I look back in my watching football through the years, I think Bruce Rioch stands out for me when he was playing for Everton, and there was a very interesting moment when I think he actually broke a Middlesbrough player's leg, and it was Graham Souness, I think, and if the story was right. There was a replay up at Ayresome Park, and Graham Souness had threatened to sort of take revenge and I think Bruce Rioch left in between those two games. He actually left Everton,
Wow.
Now whether that was all connected, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there have been some tough players down there. But is it usually defenders?
I think the era before,
Mm.
we got brought up with all that with the Leeds team and all that. But in my era, you had the crazy gang. We had Terry on last week,
Yeah.
didn't we? But I sort of missed them.
Yeah.
There would have been like I played with Big Dunk, and Dunk wasn't dirty, but he could leap. And if his elbow just happened to be out and your head was there, you're going to feel it. So I don't think
Is that the case for the defence there?
yeah. But I don't think I never feared anyone. There was don't get me wrong. If the ball was going back stick and you were against and you knew there was a big giant coming in, you knew you're getting hurt. But that's just football.
I remember when I was at Everton as press officer, I was stood at the top. I used to stand at the top of the tunnel, and there's a great picture actually of Duncan's shirt ripped right down here, and we played Spurs, as I say, and John Scales was marking Duncan, and John Scales come off substituted, and he came past me and just looked at me, and his eyes were glaring, and he said, "He's a something animal," and he pointed to Duncan, and he was like proper gone at this point, John Scales, and he went down the steps, to the dressing room, and you just realised it was a great insight. It was a so privileged place to be.
I think, as you just mentioned, I think strikers back when we because they used to have a lot of target men, didn't they? There used to be a lot of big guys, So I think strikers would have been in many duels with centre halves all the time, and you'd see cuts and bruises all the time because there is elbows flying, and there's people getting buttered, and I'd say they had more duels than probably everyone else, really.
Yeah. He also talked about the best player he ever played with. I mean, Michael Laudrup. I don't think any of us can disagree with that. Such a talented player. Who was your best
But
best opponent that you played against?
Michael Laudrup was one of my favourite players ever growing up. He was an unbelievable player, wasn't he? Best player I played with was probably Andre.
Yeah.
Andre Kanchelskis. He had everything, Andre. He'd go on the outside, he'd come on the inside, he scored some important headers. He was fit, he was always in the gym, he was strong. He was a good lad. He could have a laugh. He'd work back for you. He was outstanding player. I played with a Ballon d'Or player at Man City and George Weah.
Wow, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But George Weah wasn't at his best in play for us. But if you look on that background, George Weah, I played with Gaza at Burnley. You know, Gaza was me growing up in England was the greatest player I've seen as an English player.
Go on with maybe Peter Beasley.
And Peter, well, I was a young lad at Everton with Peter, but I never played with Peter in an 11-a-side game.
Well, can I tell you something?
Go on.
I beat you there because I played with us in a charity match. We used to do a thing at Everton where ahead of the derby game, we'd play like a media game, and whichever ground the derby was at, we'd play the media game at the other one. And this was a Goodison once, and Peter Beasley came to play in our team, you know, as a bit of a ringer. And we played up front with him. I was the main striker. Peter was just playing off me, and he put this ball. It was just fantastic, you know, right to my toes, and I sent it up into the family enclosure, you know, as you do. And but the great thing was, and real pro, you know, he came over and said, "Could see what you were trying to do there." You know, I couldn't see what I was trying to do, but he said he couldn't.
Well, he's one of the greatest names in British football, isn't he? I played with a great centre half. We could have went right through it. I played with a great centre half for one season in Richard Gough, who was just unbelievable. He was in his late 30s, unbelievable. I'd love to have seen him at his prime, but even when I played with him then, he was by far the best centre half I played with. But Andre, for me, we got him. He come from Man U, went to Everton, went abroad, but what a player. What a player.
Incredible. Well, if you've got your favourite player, your best player, or maybe a player that you think was one of the toughest players ever to play in the Premier League, or even before that, please let us know at the Added Time Podcast Twitter page, or leave it on a comment page on YouTube. Whichever way you want to get in touch with us, please do so. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Added Time Podcast. We'll see you next time. This episode of the Added Time Podcast is sponsored by Phone Express.